The Biography of Charles Darwin, the Originator of Evolutionary Theory. Chapter 1, The Beginning of Curiosity, 1809 to 1825. Charles Robert Darwin was born on February 12, 1809, in Shrewsbury, Shropshire, England, into an intellectual and affluent family. He was the fifth of 6 children of Dr. Robert Darwin, a prominent figure in the medical community, and Susanna Wedgwood, daughter of the renowned ceramics manufacturer Josiah Wedgwood. The Darwin family belonged to the upper middle class, characterized by a spirit of freedom and progressive thought. His childhood was more closely tied to a passion for exploring nature than to books. From a young age, Charles was fascinated with collecting insects, rocks, seashells, and often wandered through the fields around his home to learn about nature. His mother was the first to sow the seeds of his love for botany, but after her death in 1817, when Charles was just 8 years old, his older brother Erasmus became his primary guide. In 1818, Charles was sent to Shrewsbury School, where he studied classical subjects such as Latin and Greek. However, these dry subjects failed to spark his interest, and Charles was often reprimanded for his inattention, being more engrossed in conducting chemistry experiments with his brother in the family shed. His love for science was fueled by books like Zoonomia by his grandfather Erasmus Darwin, a naturalist with many progressive ideas. Among them were some rudimentary thoughts about evolution. In 1825, at the age of 16, Charles was withdrawn from school by his father due to poor academic performance and sent to the University of Edinburgh to study medicine, following a family tradition. This decision marked the first turning point in Darwin's scientific journey, a path he had no idea would become his lifelong destiny. Chapter 2, The Educational Journey, 1825 to 1831. At the University of Edinburgh, Charles quickly realized that he was not suited for medicine. Surgeries without anesthesia horrified him, and theoretical lectures bored him. However, he was powerfully drawn to the world of biology and discoveries about nature. He joined the Plinian Society, where students gathered to discuss natural history, and studied the classification of marine organisms. Under the guidance of biologist Robert Edmund Grant, a follower of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's evolutionary theory. Conversations with Grant about species transformation planted deep seeds in Darwin's thinking, though he was not yet fully convinced at the time. Beyond biology, Charles also took an interest in geology and botany, frequently joining his brother Erasmus on field trips to observe nature. However, his father, disappointed by Charles's lack of progress in medicine, decided to redirect him. In 1827, Charles was sent to the University of Cambridge to pursue a Bachelor of Arts degree, focusing on theology, classics, and mathematics, as preparation for becoming a parish clergyman, in line with the family tradition of the time. At Cambridge, Charles continued to lack interest in the required subjects but found great passion in collecting insects and studying natural history. He befriended Professor of Botany John Stevens Henslow, who was not only a teacher but also an inspiring mentor and friend. It was Henslow who opened up a vast scientific world to Charles. Henslow encouraged him to develop analytical thinking and introduced him to classic works like Personal Narrative by the explorer Humboldt, igniting in him a desire to explore the world. Under Henslow's influence, Charles began to veer toward the path of naturalism. He also joined a geological survey trip with Professor Adam Sedgwick in Wales during the summer of 1831. The trip familiarized him with methods of field observation and geological analysis. That same year, thanks to Henslow's recommendation, Charles was introduced to Captain Robert Fitzroy, who was seeking a naturalist to accompany him on a round-the-world voyage aboard HMS Beagle. Initially, his father strongly opposed the idea. Thanks to the persuasion of his uncle Josiah Wedgwood too, Charles was allowed to join. On December 27, 1831, Charles Darwin, at the age of just 22, set sail on the Beagle, embarking on a journey that would change the history of human science. Chapter 3, The Voyage on HMS Beagle, 1831 to 1836. The voyage on HMS Beagle lasted nearly 5 years, from 1831 to 1836, taking Charles Darwin across South America, the Galapagos Islands, Tahiti, New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa. As a naturalist, he collected specimens, recorded observations, and sent valuable collections back to England. Beyond scientific surveys, The ship also carried out a naval mission to map the coastlines of South America. The ship served the strategic interests of Great Britain. Under the command of Captain Robert Fitzroy, a conservative with deep religious beliefs, Darwin frequently engaged in debates about the origin of life, divine creation, and the natural order. These exchanges not only honed his critical thinking but also helped him solidify his scientific arguments. In South America, Darwin discovered fossils of ancient animals like the Megatherium, a giant ground sloth, prompting him to question extinction and species change. He also noticed the unique distribution of organisms in each region, such as the small ostriches in southern South America, distinct from the larger ostriches in the north. These observations gradually formed the basis for the idea that organisms might have changed over time and according to their habitats. Particularly at the Galapagos Islands, Darwin noticed subtle yet distinct differences between the finch species on each island. Each species had a different beak shape and feeding habit, yet they all seemed to stem from a common ancestor. These differences appeared to reflect adaptations to local environments, highlighting the process of biological divergence. He also studied Galapagos tortoises, noting that their shell shapes varied by island, once again suggesting a link between evolution and adaptation. Despite frequent seasickness and health issues like headaches and exhaustion, Darwin persevered in recording, observing, and reflecting. On October 2, 1836, he returned to England with thousands of specimens and a vast trove of data. The Beagle voyage was not only a turning point in his life but also the foundation for his entire scientific career thereafter. Chapter 4, Formulating the Theory of Evolution, 1836 to 1859. After returning to England, Darwin settled in London and immediately began analyzing the specimens collected from the voyage. He collaborated with leading scientists like Richard Owen, who studied fossils, and John Gould, a bird expert who classified the Galapagos finches, confirming they were distinct species. This finding reinforced Darwin's suspicion that species could change and adapt based on their environments. In 1837, Darwin began writing his journal on the transmutation of species, outlining his initial thoughts on evolution. A breakthrough came in 1838 when he read Thomas Malthus's essay on the principle of population. He realized that if organisms reproduced beyond resource capacity, a struggle for survival would ensue, and only the best adapted individuals would survive. Only those individuals would pass on their traits, forming the mechanism of natural selection. Though he had grasped this grand theory, Darwin did not publish it immediately. With his cautious nature and rigorous scientific spirit, he wanted to gather more evidence. In 1842, he wrote a 35-page sketch, expanding it to a 230-page draft by 1844, but still kept it private. He feared that publishing the theory would provoke a fierce backlash, especially in a society still dominated by creationist beliefs. In 1839, Darwin married his cousin Emma Wedgwood, a woman of deep Catholic faith. They had 10 children, 7 of whom survived to adulthood. Their marriage was full of love, but at times faced inner conflicts over faith and science. Though worried for her husband's soul, Emma steadfastly supported him quietly and consistently. In 1851, the death of their daughter Annie at age 10 caused Darwin immense grief and further distanced him from traditional religious faith. That same year, he was awarded the Royal Medal for his outstanding geological work. However, his declining health, with symptoms like headaches, chest pain, and fatigue, forced him to withdraw from public events and work from home. In 1858, an unexpected event occurred. Young naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace sent Darwin a manuscript outlining a theory of natural selection remarkably similar to what he had been developing for 2 decades. Encouraged by friends like Lyell and Hooker, Darwin agreed to publish his theory alongside Wallace's. Chapter 5, On the Origin of Species and Controversy, 1859 to 1871. On July 1, 1858, the essays of Darwin and Wallace were presented at the Linnean Society in London, officially announcing the idea of natural selection. Realizing the need for broader and faster dissemination, Darwin poured his efforts into writing a concise summary instead of the massive work he had been drafting. On November 24, 1859, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection was published and became a publishing phenomenon. The initial 1,250 copies sold out on the day of release. The book argued that species were not fixed but evolved gradually through natural selection, where beneficial variations enabled organisms to survive and pass on genetic traits. Though it did not directly mention humans, the implication that humans were not exempt from this evolutionary process shocked public opinion. Reactions to On the Origin of Species were varied. Many scientists, such as Joseph Hooker and Thomas Huxley, enthusiastically supported it, while religious authorities and some conservative scientists fiercely opposed it. Huxley became the most steadfast defender of evolution, unafraid to publicly debate opponents like Bishop Wilberforce. Within academia, some scientists like Richard Owen and Adam Sedgwick, Darwin's former teacher, publicly objected, arguing that the theory lacked genetic evidence and contradicted morality. These criticisms pained Darwin, but he remained steadfast in his belief in scientific reasoning, though his frail health kept him from direct debates. Darwin continued working tirelessly. In 1868, he published The Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication, analyzing parallels between artificial and natural selection. The work expanded the depth of evolutionary theory and explained biodiversity through practical experiments. In 1871, he published The Descent of Man, and Selection in Relation to Sex, where he formally addressed humans. He addressed humans as part of biological evolution. He argued that humans shared ancestry with primates, and emotions, culture, and behaviors could all be viewed through an evolutionary lens. This was a bold and controversial step, but it also illuminated the evolutionary ideas he pursued throughout his life. Chapter 6, Final Years and Legacy, 1872 to 1882. In his final decade, Darwin devoted himself to studies in botany, applied biology, and evolutionary psychology. He published influential works like The Fertilization of Orchids, 1862, The Movements and Habits of Climbing Plants, 1875, and The Formation of Vegetable Mold Through the Action of Worms, 1881. Through these works, Darwin demonstrated the adaptability and sophisticated mechanisms of the plant world. He also highlighted the critical role of earthworms in ecosystems, a pioneering contribution to modern ecology. In 1872, he released The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, asserting that emotions, from facial expressions to behaviors, had evolutionary origins. This work laid the foundation for evolutionary psychology and paved the way for later modern studies, notably those by Paul Ekman on facial expressions. Alongside scientific research, Darwin continued to expand aspects of evolutionary theory, from geology to ecology, physiology to human behavior. While living and working at Down House, he maintained a routine of steady work, daily walks, and gardening, keeping his mind sharp. Though his health steadily declined, Darwin suffered from persistent symptoms like chest pain, fatigue, insomnia, and digestive disorders. Some later researchers suggested he might have contracted Chagas disease from a parasitic insect bite during his South American travels, though others proposed chronic anxiety or heart disease. Though the cause remains unclear, his condition forced him into a reclusive life, unable to participate in public academic forums. In 1877, the University of Cambridge awarded him an honorary doctorate, but due to his health, he could not attend the ceremony and declined to formally accept the title. He also received numerous international honors, such as the Bally Medal from the London Medical College and honorary memberships in various scientific academies worldwide. On April 19, 1882, Charles Darwin took his last breath at Down House, aged 73. His funeral was held with great ceremony at Westminster Abbey, the resting place of some of England's greatest minds, next to the tomb of Isaac Newton. The burial of an evolutionary thinker there reflects the profound recognition society gave to his immense contributions. Chapter 7, Eternal Legacy. Charles Darwin left behind a monumental scientific legacy, fundamentally altering how humanity understands life and its place in nature. The theory of evolution through natural selection, first presented in On the Origin of Species, became the cornerstone of modern biology. The concepts he introduced, from natural selection and common ancestry to biological adaptation, have been validated and expanded upon. They have been confirmed through later studies in genetics and molecular biology. One of the highlights of his legacy is the concept of natural selection. Organisms with better adapted traits are more likely to survive and reproduce, gradually altering the genetic frequency within populations. Additionally, he proposed the idea of common ancestry. This idea asserts that all organisms originated from one or a few ancient ancestors. This view was strongly reinforced after Gregor Mendel's laws of inheritance, contemporary with Darwin but unknown during his lifetime, were rediscovered in the early 20th century, leading to the modern synthesis of evolutionary theory. Darwin also made significant contributions to explaining biodiversity, particularly through his studies of finches and tortoises in the Galapagos Islands, classic examples of speciation through adaptation to local environments. In The Descent of Man, he further extended evolutionary theory to explain human origins and emotional expressions. He laid the groundwork for evolutionary psychology and biological anthropology. Darwin's impact went beyond science. His evolutionary theory shook the foundations of Western philosophy, religion, ethics, and culture, raising questions about human nature, free will, and God's role in creation. It also inspired art, literature, and intellectual movements from the 19th century to the present. His name has been given to numerous species, places, such as Mount Darwin and the Darwin Archipelago, research institutes, and scientific awards. His works have been translated into dozens of languages. They have become required reading in biology, philosophy of science, and the history of human thought. Even modern debates about evolution and creationism invariably reference Darwin as an unavoidable starting point. Charles Darwin is a symbol of intellect, perseverance, and scientific courage. He was a man who dared to confront prejudice in pursuit of truth. His legacy not only endures in academia but continues to nurture curiosity and the spirit of exploration in humanity.